Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick-Taking Table. I'm taking a moment to say happy holidays. It was Hanukkah last week, and then this week is Christmas and Kwanzaa, so I thought I'd show off my advent calendars. I got SpongeBob and then cheeses, so kind of an interesting mix there. But what is today, the 23rd? Why don't we pop open the 23rd and see, oh, I kind of butchered it, but chocolate, as always. Delicious. And then the cheese advent calendar is great because what they do is they have a joke on the outside. So you pull open this lid, you open the box, and then it says a joke on the other side of this paper that I'm absolutely destroying. So what Christmas film stars Bruce Willis? Die Hard Cheese. I don't quite get the joke if I'm being honest with you. Is it because there's soft cheese and hard cheese? I guess that's the joke. But what's behind it is, ooh, aged red Leicestershire. That sounds delicious. Oh, and the expiration date is my birthday. There's something fun about when you see food that has your birthday as an expiration date. I don't know what it is. That's red, and that is aged all right. Well, that out of the way, happy holidays, and welcome to December again, where the hook is, it's always good to take a giant bite of cheese before you have to keep talking. The hook is two mechanism games. So the game we're covering today is Trick of Trip. It's by Noon. Oh my gosh. And it's trick taking with I cut you choose. I shouldn't have chosen to cut off such a big bite of that cheese. But as you can see in other games, like Tussie Mussy or New York Slice, it's a mechanism where you kind of divide something and you give it to an opponent and they choose from that. So the idea comes from like the best way to cut up cakes or like a pizza, where you cut the slices as equally as you possibly think, and then when you offer it to someone, they'll try to pick whatever one they want. So you don't want to give like too big of a slice or too small of a slice because you're always stuck with whatever isn't taken. So it's a nice kind of balancing fair mechanism. In this game, Trick of Trip, you get dealt 6 cards and you actually will break them up 3-3 and then you offer them to an opponent and they'll take one of them, you get the other one. So it's like a weird draft way to build your hand. Pretty fascinating. Let's go to the table and I'll show you how to play, hopefully without eating cheese at the same time. The deck in Trick of Trip is made up of 4 suits numbered 1 through 12. Then there's 6 trump cards with white borders. The 7 over here is a special card, which I'll explain later on. Here we have Trick of Trip set up for 3 players. So how you set up is you just have the deck in the middle, and then each player is going to draw 6 cards. There are only going to be 4 rounds, so you're going to do this 4 times. But how it starts is each player is going to break up their hand into 2 sets of 3 cards each. So maybe SpongeBob's looking at their hand, they don't want the 12s to be together, and maybe they just split it up kind of like this. So then they're going to combine the 2 sets, and they're going to show it to the person on their right. And so Pluto is going to do the same thing. Pluto's going to split it up, 3 and 3, give it to Handsome Squidward, and then Handsome Squidward is going to do the same for SpongeBob. It's going to split their cards up, 3 and 3, and give it to SpongeBob. So now each player is going to pick which set they want. So maybe from SpongeBob's point of view, they see this, they think, I like this set, so they're going to keep that. The set they don't pick goes back to the person who gave it to him as half of their hand. So Squidward now has their half. Squidward's going to maybe pick this set, so they have that. So now this is Pluto's, and then say Pluto picks this set, and so this goes back to SpongeBob. So SpongeBob has half of kind of what they got at the start, and then half of what Squidward offered them when they gave their choice to cut and choose. Then, first player is going to just be random. Let's say it's Squidward. They're going to lead to the trick. And so, Trick of Trip is a must-follow game. So say Squidward leads with a banana. SpongeBob here has to follow suit with a banana. So maybe SpongeBob plays this 4 of banana right here. And then finally, it comes to Pluto, and Pluto only has 1 banana. So the interesting thing, though, is if they wanted to, you can always play trump into the trick. So they could play this 6. But for now, let's just say they play that banana. How tricks resolve is it's the lowest card of the led suit if there's no trump. So SpongeBob here will win the trick with their 4 banana. Then the card that was won will be kept by the player who played it, so SpongeBob will keep that 4, and then the other cards are just discarded out of the game. So then SpongeBob will lead to the next trick. So maybe they lead with this 1 banana. Coming to Pluto now, they don't have any banana in their hand, so they can play whatever they want. Maybe they just play that 3. And then Squidward over here, they would have to follow suit again, but they don't have a banana, so they just play this 9 of pairs. So SpongeBob was the lowest of the lead suit, so they'll keep that and then discard the other ones, and they'll lead again. So SpongeBob led to the second trick with this pair, and now maybe Pluto, they don't want to play their 12 or their 3 yet, and they do want to trump in. So you can trump in as much as you want, and then Squidward over here, if they wanted to, they would have to play a following suit of one of these pair cards. So maybe they play the 6. So the highest of the lead suit is beaten by the trump, so Pluto will take their trump card, and these 2 would get discarded. In a different trick, let's say SpongeBob actually led pineapple because they live in a pineapple. Maybe Pluto, they don't believe they're gonna win with this 12, so they put their trump into that trick instead. So they're winning. However, looking at Handsome Squidward's hand, they have one of these special 7 cards. And now what those do is if there's a trump in the trick of a 7, then the 7 would win. And if there's multiple 7s and a trump, then it's just the first 7. But so they will actually win with the 7 and count that as points for later. So these would then just get discarded. If, however, in the backward example, Pluto had just followed suit with that 12, the 7 is just 7 when there's no trump involved. So the 6 would actually win because it's the lowest of the lead suit. So here we are at the end of the round. There's been 6 tricks played, so there's 6 cards in the scoring piles of all the players. So as you can see here, you'll separate it by suits. So SpongeBob here has won 2 bananas, so they keep them together, whereas these are all separated. And trump is its own special suit. So at the end of a hand, you'll see who has the lowest score. They'll just lead to the next round. They don't score right now. It's just an indication of who the next lead is. And how you do the score is each player will look at their piles and they'll do kind of a calculation. So it's the highest number in that suit times the number of cards you have in that suit. So if you just have 1, like over here, this is worth 9 points and this is worth 7 points. But over here, SpongeBob has 2 cards in the banana suit, so it'd be 4 times 2 for 8 points. Even with those 8 points, they are the lowest, so they'll lead to the trick starting in the second round. And how you set up the second round is you just take all the discarded cards and then the undealt cards, you'll shuffle them together, then you'll deal 6 to each player and do the same process. You'll do that for 4 total hands. Here's an example of what the end might look like in a game of Trick of Trip. So looking at SpongeBob over here, they got 11 as their highest card, times 4, so that's 44 points, plus another 4, plus another 10, so 58, plus 9 is 67, I guess. And then Squidward over here, they got 16, plus 3 times 12, so 36 plus 16, which in a non-cut editing was 52. You have to believe me on that. And then finally, we can just agree that that is how scoring works. And then whoever has the most points wins. So that is Trick of Trip. I'm surrounded by my trusty Christmas trees, although this one's more of like a Christmas twig. It's looking pretty Charlie Brownish. I don't know if you can hang much off it. But Trick of Trip is an interesting game. I like it. I think there's kind of inherent problems to it, which we'll get into in a bit, but it's almost like, from a meta sense, like the classic example of modern trick-taking these days, because just at every avenue there's a twist, There's a twist on how you get your cards, the I cut you choose. There's a twist in how you take the cards, where it's like lowest and you only take yours. And then the scoring twist, obviously. There's just like almost a formula to it, where I would use this as like a great example of how you would make a modern trick taker, if that makes sense. And then even like the theme is I think it's more postmodern, but it's just a perfect example of like, you take a theme that you think is interesting, it doesn't really fit, and you put that on like a few different interesting mechanisms, and you kind of have a modern trick taker. Someone's blowing a leaf blower, so apologize if it comes through in the audio, but my favorite mechanism is the I cut you choose. There's just such an amazing choice there with how you value cards and trying to guess how someone else values cards. So if you have a couple of low cards, do you try to split them up
if they're the same suit, do you try to push them into one hand and then just make sure that person never has lead and they can't, kind of run the table with those two lows? Or do you value trump more? Because trump, you may trump. So that's always a super important consideration, because that person's probably going to win a trick if they have any trump in their hand. The cutting is funny because, so you cut it, you'll also pass that and then get past a new set. And so not only are you cutting and assuming what someone might take, but then you have to work off that assumption when you take for what you get. So it's almost, it's like a double assumption, like built on itself, which I just love. There's so many moments where I think that, okay, the person's going to take that. So then if they take those, then I'll actually want this half of what was offered me. And it's just a funny moment in this game where you really realize that a lot of the times what you value isn't what other people value. And it's a funny, not wake-up call, but it's always a funny realization when what you get back was the opposite of what you thought. And then you have kind of this mismatch hand that you didn't quite expect. And I think doing the I cut you choose on 6 cards is just perfect. It's almost like, I don't think 4 or 8 would have been better, because you get just enough to remember, and just enough to have kind of like 3 and 3 is a very manageable thing to split up, In some games where it's I cut you choose, there's almost like too many choices and kind of permutations on what could go out. And you always feel like, if I would have tweaked just a little bit more, I might have split it perfectly. But this one's like, there's only so many combinations. 6 cards can kind of split into 3 and 3. So I feel like it's like perfectly manageable. The trick taking is interesting. I like the idea that the lowest wins. Sometimes, and this is more scoring, sometimes you can kind of just get away with a really high card through what I don't think is anyone's fault or like misplays in the trick taking. And that can kind of snowball into a really high score. But again, that's more scoring. I do like the fact that lowest wins and the May trump has good kind of counteracting. Sometimes people will lead with, like an 8 or a 9 or 10, and then the other person's off suit, so it comes down to that last person or, the last 2 or 3 people to kind of play a trump if they can to stop the person who led from winning a really high card. There's some interesting kind of checks and balances in the systems, especially with trump. Like if you just lead trump or whatever, or if you do a May follow trump, there's always the 7s that can still win it. And I think there's just enough surprises in the trick taking to keep it fresh throughout the 4 hands, which again, I think 4 hands is also perfect. But getting to the scoring, it's interesting, and I love how actually it pulls out cards from the deck. So slowly over the course of the game, the deck's losing all the low values. And it's fun to have a deck that you draw from that slowly gets like customized or pulled out, or not customized, but like changed in an interesting way that everyone can see because it's face up in front of everyone. There's cool moments where at the start of the hand you're like, oh, this is a pretty good hand, I know how to break this up. But at the end of those 4 hands in the game, you're thinking that you're just past bad cards, but then you look down and you're like, oh, because all the low ones are already out. There's like a funny realization where the deck and the hands are completely differently valued from the first hand to the last hand in the game. So the last part to talk about is the scoring. And there's some parts I like, there's some parts I don't like. What I do enjoy is the fact that you can see it over the 4 hands. You can always kind of prepare and make sure the person who's winning maybe won't get another in the suit that they have a lot of. There's a lot of kind of planning with the fact that there's an open scoring and a scoring that handles or lasts over the 4 hands. It's cool how you can kind of plan and use that to your advantage. The tough part of the scoring is sometimes someone will just win a trick that gives them a 10 or a 12, and that will just be huge. It's funny how like one win can just make a ton of the scoring for someone, just because it's so multiplicative. I think I said that right. A 10 or 11 or 12 can just launch someone into like orbit. And I found a lot of times the scoring is pretty runaway, and you can see that happening around the 2nd or 3rd hand. Once someone gets like a 10 or an 11 or 12, the score never can go away. So in some games like List and Took or Stick'em or some of those games where if someone is doing well, there's always a way to hurt them and tank their score. In this game, which maybe isn't a bad thing and maybe it's a preference, if someone has a certain amount of points, they can never go down from there. So if you're going into like the third or fourth hand and someone has just like a ton of points, there's not much you can do to change that, especially because like each hand is only 6 tricks, so it's like the breathing room is tough. So I just found that a lot of times just 1 or 2 tricks can kind of make or break the game. You know, if at the end of the second hand or the third hand someone just happened to get a 12 or a 10, it's like, ooh, that's it's not like game over, but they're probably gonna win. But overall, that's fine because it's such a quick game, and you know, maybe they deserve to win that 10, 11, or 12 because they foresaw that happening and they made some cool moves. So overall, it's tough because I like so much of what the game does, but that runaway leader or that kind of runaway scoring, like multiplication, is tough to kind of wrangle in my mind, and I found a lot of times someone will just run away with it. So that is Trick of Trip. I like it. There's kind of a lot of mechanisms thrown in here, kind of like when we talked about Caddy, and they mostly work together. I think the I Cut You Choose is informed pretty well by the fact that, you know, lows win and trumps and sevens. They're the card play systems help make what I think is the best part and the most important part of the game, the I Cut You Choose mechanism, a little bit more juicy. So I do find that the systems in place kind of reinforce why you would play this game. And if you like I Cut You Choose, this is a great game for it. There is so much to that decision that even if the scoring is kind of hard to wrangle and there's other systems in place that are a little goofy, I think it's still an incredible look into how you can draft your hand in a kind of a different or bizarre, maybe unique is the right word, way. But thanks so much for watching.